This is a primer on the deterministic model of optimal growth. The deterministic model of optimal growth is a mathematical framework used to study how an economy can maximize its long-term economic growth, while considering certain constraints and assumptions. It's deterministic because it assumes that the future is entirely predictable and does not involve random factors. One of the central components is the production function, which represents how inputs like labor and capital are transformed into goods and services. Let's use a typical Cobb-Douglas production function as an example and cover some of the model's assumptions. In order to model output, we assume there is a constant scalar, the total factor productivity or technology, so that our function is strictly increasing. We have physical capital which will be considered full at the beginning of each time period and then depreciate by the end of the period. And lastly, our most costly input, labor. We maintain labor constant by assuming a constant population level, and that households have no desire for leisure. Lastly, we add alpha and beta, the shares, or efficiency, of capital and labor. Remember that in a Cobb-Douglas function these sum to 1, which gives us our constant returns to scale. There are several more basic assumptions. One critical assumption is that individuals and firms act rationally to maximize their utility or profit. Additionally, these models often assume that there are no external shocks or uncertainties. They also assume that markets function perfectly, meaning there are no frictions such as informational asymmetry or transaction costs. The goal now is to find a path of economic variables over time that maximizes utility for households and thus society. This means making a critical choice about how much to consume today versus investing for the future. Assuming none of our output is wasted, we have our consumption for today, plus the investment for tomorrow, minus depreciation, equal to today's output. Everything up to this point should be quite familiar from previous econ courses. Now we want to go further and find our optimal values of capital in period t+1 that will maximize utility. We can take our utility maximization function, find our Kuhn-Tucker conditions, check inequality constraints and boundary conditions, and convert the result into a first-order differential equation by performing a change of variable from kt+1 into zt and then plot zt against zt+1 and there's an easier way. Find the value function by maximizing the above function for k0. And then we can use our discount factor beta to easily relate k0 and k1. At this point we no longer need to worry about optimizing over time, as long as we know our starting capital for a time period. We can choose the optimal amount to invest in the next period to optimize consumption, leading us to our final functional equation. Lo osimos amigos. Vk is our maximum utility value function. This has been a basic introduction to deterministic modeling of optimal growth. Future expansions of this lesson will include bounded returns, Euler equations, dynamic programming, and a detailed analysis of the factors affecting labor in the production function.